Hey, I'm bald now. If you've ever looked into installing a GDEMU in a Sega Dreamcast, you have no doubt heard something about the Dreamcast overheating if you don't add some extra mods. The internet cannot agree on how to fix this, or even if you need to fix this, and frankly, it's annoying. Oh, just put a 330 ohm 1 watt resistor across the 12 volt rail. Don't put resistors in your Dreamcast. Those produce remove heat. The 12 volt regulator altogether. No, don't remove the 12 volt regulator. It's used in part of the VGA. Just remove circuit. The power supply altogether and get a Dream PSU. Don't get a Dream PSU. Those aren't very good quality and can supply crappy power and affect your image. The power supply is high quality, and the problem only exists for PAL consoles. If you have an NTSC console, this isn't even an issue. And just enjoy your GDEMU. Dude, you put a GDEMU in your Dreamcast? Thing's got 2 hours to live. It's gonna overheat. What you gotta do is get a Dream PSU and remove the 12 volt rail and then apply a 330 ohm resistor to your That'll get it done. You will find convincing people on the internet, some of them actually smart, recommending any one of these solutions, and no one can seem to agree. Not only that, in my searching, you can't really even find anyone who did any thermal testing on their Dreamcasts. There is some information out there about the thermals of the Dreamcast while it's running. Some of it is better than others. Most of it is just people using a cheap IR temperature gun and pointing it at the console, like the outside shell of it while it's running. There is a video of a guy with a PAL console who took the top shell off and pointed a temperature gun at the power supply while it was running, but that doesn't really tell me anything about like the actual thermals while the console has the shell on and is heating up over time. For myself, I don't mind waiting and seeing if it breaks. I will just fix it again. But I want to provide these mods for people, and if I'm going to do that, I want to make sure I can trust the Dreamcast so I can feel good about providing them. And selfishly, because I hate dealing with problems related to a service I provided. It is for this reason that I decided to do my own real thermal testing and create my own mod. Created a mod is generous. I made a bracket and a shield in Fusion 360. If my tests are to believed, and you'll see them later in the video, they're also linked in the description, then my mod can reduce the power supply's temperature by as much as 10 degrees C compared to a basic GDEMU installation, and even about 5 degrees C compared to a stock Dreamcast. And all of this is done for about $10. In this video, I will first go over the mod and my thermal testing, and then I will show you how to install it. The general idea behind this mod isn't new. Instead of resistors to put a load on the 12 volt rail, just use a 12 volt fan. Then it applies a load, doesn't heat up like resistors do, and at least it's blowing air around in there. But I'm bringing two new things to the table as far as I can tell. One, I created a fan mount bracket that has shrouds to make sure it's pulling fresh air from outside the console through the rear grille. And two, I did the thermal testing. Oh, and I created a new power supply shield that doesn't have the 90-degree bend so that air can flow better over the power supply. It is an N of 1 test and may not be the most scientific, but it's better than any data I could find on the internet, and that's good enough for me. Let's go over the mods that I created. This is the fan mount bracket that I designed. It takes a 40mm fan. Here's the one I used. And it is angled in a way that blows air over the center of the power supply and also gets a bit of the GDEMU. The important part is this shrouding on the back. This follows the contours, roughly, of the top shell of the Dreamcast. This seals around the fan so that it should be pulling air from the grill on the back and not just recirculating air inside of the console. With the fan blowing air in this direction, if we use the OEM power supply shield, it would be blocking the airflow. You can see this, the fan's aimed at a wall right now. So I took measurements and created a power supply shield that doesn't have the 90-degree bend, which allows air to flow over the power supply. When the GD-ROM is installed in a stock Dreamcast, This 90-degree bend helps direct air along the back and then over the power supply. But with the GD-ROM removed, like when you install a GDEMU, that no longer happens, and now it's just a barrier to airflow. So the general idea is that because of the ducting in this fan, we are sucking in nice, cold, cool, crispy air to cool the power supply. And also, if we're lucky, it will help increase the pressure, and that will help the exhaust fan push some more air out. Because once the GD-ROM is removed, it seems like it kind of struggles to move air. Now, all of this is good and well, but if I stopped here, I would just be adding another stick to the fire of arguments about how to solve this problem. Another bullet point for people to argue about why it does or doesn't work. That's why I actually thermally tested my theory and mods with a digital thermometer that I use for BGA repair. This thermometer has two thermocouples attached to wires that I can place where I'd like to take temperature readings. Now, I needed a way to get these wires in there without disturbing the actual airflow of a stock Dreamcast. I couldn't just leave the shell cracked open because that's not how the Dreamcast is going to actually behave in a real world scenario. And I couldn't run it through the top, through the lid. One, because when the GD-ROM's installed, there's no room to do that. And two, if the lid's open, air is escaping through the top. It is no longer in a real world condition. So to make sure I kept the thermal properties as standard as possible, I removed the AC plug on the back and extended the AC plug further out. So now there's just kind of a hole in the back that's big enough to support many wires. The hole was then filled with hot glue and covered in packing tape to make sure it was sealed so it would behave as stock. I put one thermocouple on this transformer and one on the intake side of the exhaust. You can see I routed the wires down here on the side where there's already some wires. These shouldn't really interfere with much. I chose the transformer because in some preliminary testing, when I was not using this method, I found that the hottest part on the power supply was almost always this transformer. In a previous test, I measured 70 degrees C with a temperature gun on this transformer. This transformer also seemed like I could apply a thermocouple without blocking much cooling. I've done some previous tests where I attached it to one of these heat shields on the regulators, and I have some of that data, but those are heat sinks, and if I apply a bunch of tape to them, they're no longer cooling. So this transformer seemed like a good option. The other position was chosen so that we could see how hot the air was that was leaving the console. Here are the results of my tests. It is just one set of tests on one single Dreamcast with some other old data that at least has something. It's not perfect, but I do think it is at least helpful data, and it is a step in the right direction. And at the very least, it makes me feel better about the mods that I'm providing. This document goes into more detail about the actual methodology that I used for the testing, and you can find a link to it in the description below. In short, I tested 3 different configurations, all with the thermocouples in the same place. One with a stock Dreamcast, one with a GDEMU minimally installed, no heating treatment or anything, and one with my mods. In all tests, the game NBA 2K1 was booted up, and an exhibition game with only NPC players was started. This way we could get data of a game being actively played, but I didn't have to sit there and play it. In its stock configuration, with a real GD-ROM disk, we can see the hottest the PSU thermocouple got was 57.8 degrees C. It got pretty much there around 100 minutes, and it stayed there for another 40 minutes. Then when we installed a GDEMU and changed nothing, we can see it did get much hotter. It got to 60 degrees C in just 60 minutes, and then slowly climbed to almost 63 C by 120 minutes. It is interesting to note that in the stock configuration, the exhaust temperature was much hotter. Finally, with my mods installed, we can see a much lower temperature overall. This test has the hottest ambient temperature, only by about 0.5 degrees C, and yet we still never cracked 50 degrees C, even though this test ran the longest at 147 minutes. Interestingly, the exhaust temperature was also the lowest. I'm not sure why the stock config had the hottest exhaust, but I assume it has something to do with the stock config exhausting air much better than the hot GDEMU, which let air stagnate and heat up inside. These tests are not perfect and they need repeated, but I don't want to. I feel good having provided the first step in actually measuring and providing answers to this stuff and providing a mod that I have data shows that it at least helps the issue. That's good enough for me. Even if these readings are off by a moderate margin, it's enough data for me to feel much better about providing GDEMU installs. Now, let's go over how to install these mods. It's very easy and very cheap, assuming you have a 3D printer. To perform this mod, all you need is a 3D print of my fan bracket and the power supply shield, as well as a 12-volt 40mm fan of a similar amperage. This one is 0.08 amps. You will also need a soldering iron or just some way to tie this fan into the 12-volt rail. First, open up the console and remove the power supply and GD-ROM. Now we're going to remove the original power supply shield and install our printed one. Next, grab your fan and the fan bracket, and we're going to screw them together. You can probably find a screw somewhere that'll work to do this, but if you cannot, these screws are the perfect size for the fans that I purchased. I like to add some hot glue to the bottom and sides, not to hold it in place, that's what the screw is for, but to help with dampening any noise or vibration. Make sure that the fan is blowing the right direction. We want it blowing out towards the power supply. And on most fans, the side that has these plastic spokes that reach the center for the motor to sit on, that is the direction that the air is flowing out of. Now this is where you need to power the fan somehow. I'm electing to solder to these 12-volt and ground solder joints on the power supply. My dumb hat got in the way of both times I was soldering, so you don't actually get to see that. But then I hot glue some of the wires further up just for some strain relief. While you're in here, make sure to clean the power supply pins as best you can. I'm just using a Q-tip and rubbing alcohol here. 99% isopropyl. Now we can finally install the fan bracket with the fan in it. This bracket is made to use existing holes in the Dreamcast as well as existing screws. Remove these two top screws and place the fan bracket over top of the holes. This top right screw is very often too small and won't catch, but this can easily be fixed by swapping it for one of the longer screws that holds in the controller board. This shorter screw still works fine on the controller board. Alright, make sure the power supply is screwed back in and install your GDEMU as you would normally, and you're done. In this video, this GDEMU doesn't have all the standoffs installed. You should do that. This was just a test one that I had. But yeah, that should be everything. When you put the top case back on, you're probably going to have to get low and kind of finagle it in there. And if it ever teeters left to right, I would check kind of this front right corner and maybe trim a bit off with a pair of side cutters. I've had to do that on a few of them, but not all of them. Well, what do you think? How much did I get wrong here? I probably got something wrong. Is the mod/bracket at least helpful? I hope it is. I hope I gave something back to the community. In any case, it's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's louder than normal, but it's got good thermals. Did I solve the Dreamcast heating issue for good forever? No, probably not. But I think I gave the community another mod that I at least have the data to confirm that it does something, and it's very cheap and easy to install and keeps the Dreamcast as stock as I could get it. And that's good enough for me. Thanks for watching.